Fireside Chat, Indian Startup Ecosystem, Policies and Regulations. We have Shweta Rajpal Kohli, and if you were here yesterday, I sure hope that you were part of the panel that she was part of. Shweta is the president and CEO of the Startup Policy Forum, India's leading alliance of new age companies representing over 90 billion in valuation. With a career spanning 25 plus years across public policy, venture capital, and journalism, she has continually redefined her path, moving from newsroom to boardrooms and now to the front lines of India's innovation economy. And in conversation with her is none other than Shreya Krishnan, the MD of Anita Bjork. Please welcome.
Okay, this is an exciting conversation after yesterday.
Absolutely.
That was one angle of the spectrum, and this is the other. I'm looking forward, Shweta, to really be in conversation with you because I know your journey, right? But before we start about me asking you that, tell us a little bit about your journey. Tell us about Uber, tell us about the transitions and where you are right now. How did you land at where you are?
Thank you, Shreya. It's been fascinating and I would say privileged and blessed that I've had fantastic career opportunities. I've had two pivots in my career. So started out by accident as a journalist. I sat for my medical entrance exams after school because there's a price you pay for being a good student, and I was once. So you know how it is. Everyone's like, oh my God, but you have to appear for your medical exams because if you're not going to do it, who will? And you know what? I failed miserably. And I thank God for that because the result is that by default, I joined journalism at Lady Shri Ram College. Ours was the first batch of journalism students. And that was the start of my journalism career. I spent 18 years as a journalist, first in print media across several print publications and then in television with NDTV as their group business editor. Loved every bit of it. And I feel very, very grateful that I was a journalist in the glorious days of journalism. But I think sometime around 2 decades into the career, I felt I had a mid-career crisis. And the mid-career crisis was, I've done this for 2 decades, can I do it for the next 2? And the answer was a clear no. And that is when my public policy journey started. I was very fortunate. I got to lead Uber's public policy team for India and South Asia, led a fantastic team of 10 to 15 professionals, got ride sharing regularized in Uber, and I'll talk more about the Uber journey, but this was the time when Uber was not a thing. Like people did not know Uber in India and it was just starting. Then moved to Salesforce, similar, set up their public policy function, then moved to Sequoia Capital, which is a large venture capital firm, now called Peak 15 Partners. And finally, the next pivot came last year when I said, you know what, why not start up? And here I am today, leading the Startup Policy Forum. We're a startup for startups.
Which is so interesting, and I love policy and advocacy because I believe it has such an important role to play. But like we were discussing backstage, it's not exciting, right? The minute we start talking about policy, everybody's like, whatever. There's a zone out. Yeah, we don't want you to zone out, okay? That too after lunch session right now. But when you look at the current landscape and when you're looking at the current moment for Indian startups, and there's such a burgeon of that, it's just exciting. But what is that from a policy and regulatory perspective? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
Shreya, it's so exciting because having been a media person, I have spent my lifetime in corridors of power, right? So your Shastri Bhavan, Udyog Bhavan, Niti Aayog is where my lifetime has been, because even as a journalist, I would go and meet bureaucrats, meet ministers, interview them, talk to them. So what doesn't change is the relationship building part, because you still have to talk to them. And I think the one gap that I saw, that while 10 years ago, Prime Minister Modi, with his flagship campaign of Startup India, put Indian startups on a pedestal. And there is no other, I would say, head of state in the world who has given this kind of elevated status to the startup ecosystem. We are now the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world, but Prime Minister Modi doesn't spare an opportunity to promote startups. And he has given so much respect that now a lot of people say, you know what, from job seekers, now you feel proud to be a job creator.
Absolutely.
And, nobody feels awkward telling their parents anymore, I'm going to quit a job and start up or be a founder, or I'm going to join a startup and not a well-known big tech or a well-known corporate India name. So I think that part had happened. But the gap that I saw in my years of Uber, Salesforce, and Sequoia Capital was that while Delhi was excited about startups, Bangalore was not talking to Delhi.
Yeah,
So,
true.
I said, we need to take Indiranagar and Koramangala
And HSR
layout. I was coming to HSR next, and HSR layout to Vigyan Bhavan. Because you know what? The two sides are not talking. So
Yeah.
the one line that I always say, and my team makes fun of me sometimes because I use it so often, but I say we want to bridge the corridors of power and the corridors of innovation. Because if you don't act as that bridge, the two want to talk to each other, but they're not talking enough, and that's what we're doing.
Absolutely, to creating those conversations. I will not do a separate rapid fire, but in between, I'll keep asking you these questions. What's the most interesting / exciting, like crazy thing that you've done in your last 1 year?
I don't know, 1 year is just starting up. I think just the idea of leaving a high-paying VC job and setting up a not-for-profit that'll connect founders to policymakers was a crazy idea. But today we are 60 startups as our members at Startup Policy Forum, valued at about $90 billion.
Wow.
We complete our first anniversary this Friday, so this week is special. So
Congratulations!
Thank you for having us. Yes. So we have Startup Policy Forums. Thank you. First anniversary this week. When we started last year, we didn't know where we'd be at, but the idea has caught on, and 60 of India's high-growth startups, including Zerodha, Grow, Cred, Razorpay, Aether Energy, Pine Labs,
Wow.
Cars24. We have everyone now signed up with us saying, you know what, we want to build this community of like-minded founders who will have this platform as their voice. And then we can go talk to government, we can go talk to big tech, but we are a group of like-minded founders who want to be heard.
Wow.
So I think craziest in the last 1 year is that. But before that, I think when I've worked with founders during my time at Sequoia Capital and Peak 15, there have been crazier things, Shreya. I've got a call at 2 a.m. from people saying a founder's being picked up and taken by the cops to jail. And these are like, I'm talking about, founders people would know, but I would not name.
Yes.
Okay. And why? Because there has been some payment fraud, and because their platform has been used, the cybersecurity cell doesn't get it, and they're like, you know what, just arrest.
Yeah.
Because there is some China money angle or something, and that's where policy comes in, because to be able to help in that moment. And so when you say crazy thing, I think the craziest thing I've done is I've saved founders from going to jail, because this is the reality of India.
That's so interesting, and that also tells you about the lacuna that exists that you're filling, and incredible. Congratulations on 1 year and already being where you're at. I think it's just exciting. Yeah, if you're applauding, applaud fully. Which policy shifts in the past decade do you feel have had the most significant impact on shaping the today's world that you see as it is?
Tons, Shreya. I think we have to give credit to this government, because I was just at the National Stock Exchange last week, and I was talking to the NSE CEO, and he gave me some fascinating data about when in 2014 we had just 1 crore investors on NSE. Today that number is at 12 crore. So just the kind of regulatory reform we have seen in India.
Yeah.
The growth of startups like Grow, Zerodha, Angel One, that have made investing so easy. Each one of us can have that app and invest in. And so I think, to me, the fact that we've seen this infusion multiplied with a lot of ease of investing and regulatory reform by the capital markets regulator has been game-changing for India. GST has been game-changing for India.
True.
I think the whole, what we call the DPI, or the digital payments infrastructure, the Aadhaar stack, the whole stack. Because what we don't realize is that India's digital payment architecture is perhaps the most evolved and the most advanced anywhere in the world.
Wow.
Just
Yeah.
the fact that today every hawker, every I would say, vendor, every
On any highway, any
retailer,
tender coconut
anywhere,
seller, yeah.
and you have a QR code there, you are able to make digital payments. This is not what the rest of the world has. So we're more developed
Yeah.
than the developed world on digital payments, and India is showing everyone the way. UPI has been
Absolutely.
a game changer.
Yeah.
So I would say UPI, GST, the capital markets reform, I think India is leading the way. And then you look at models like quick commerce.
Yeah.
Where else in the world can you get anything in 10 minutes,
Like
right?
I had my colleague forgot her shoes for her sari yesterday, and she ordered metro shoes that reached her in 30 minutes. So that's the world we're living in, and that luxury is not available anywhere else in the world.
And
We're
that's India's entrepreneurial energy, Shreya, coupled with
Absolutely.
the government. You
Yeah.
know, so we have to give credit to both.
Absolutely. What do you think are some of the most common regulatory hurdles that first-time founders often face, and how do they get through that?
I think just the bureaucratic rigmarole. So while we're doing really well on some fronts, we still need to improve ease of doing business. I'll give you my own example. We're a forum that is working with the government. We have partnerships with all government departments and ministries, and we get a great welcome, very responsive, right? But as a regular startup, when we were incorporating, it took us 4 months.
Yeah.
We got asked for a bribe. So, I go and cite this to the government and say, this is someone who can, make a few calls or reach the right people.
Yeah.
But anybody who's trying to set shop in India shouldn't have to go through this. So I think incorporation, compliances, ease of doing business, there's still a lot of scope for the government to improve all of that. And
Yeah.
we're working very closely to help address these
That's
issues.
exciting, especially from where I am right now. Spent the entire last month in Vedant Sauda trying to unlock some of those collaborations, and we heard Uma Mahadevan in the morning. And for us, that's been another area where we really want to focus on. So, looking forward to collaborating with you as well on that.
Yes.
When you look at the insights that you've had in the last 1 year as you've built this, you've worked so closely with such high impact organizations. What recurring policy concerns or patterns are you observing that are emerging?
I think, Shreya, we're moving towards a trend of sovereignty in a way that, the last 1 year has been slightly insane. The geopolitical shifts that we're seeing and the uncertainty that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've made 2 trips to the US, and one of which in DC, where I went and met a lot of fellow policy people in DC, and they're like, we've never seen times like these.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on in White House, and anybody who claims to know is fibbing. So when you live in these times of geopolitical uncertainty, we've seen tariff wars, we've seen crazy stuff, I think it becomes even more important for governments to be sure about their sovereign capabilities. And we often talk about data being the new oil, and India wanting to do a lot more on sovereign. I think one thing that we've picked up very clearly from the government as something that they're doubling down on is their push towards building India's deep tech capabilities.
Yeah.
And by deep tech, you mean semiconductors, defense, space tech, drones, advanced manufacturing. And I think that's no longer a luxury. It is a must-do for a country like India. And we're supporting the government a lot. We've taken out an initiative called 100 Desi Deep Techs, where we're identifying a cohort of 100 deep tech companies that will give us very sharp, actionable policy inputs that we can take to the government. But the government's doing a lot. On its part, the government has introduced something called a 1 lakh crore RDI scheme, where towards research and developments, towards the venture capital ecosystem funding deep tech. So we think there'll be a lot of acceleration and focus on the deep tech ecosystem, and rightly so, because we need to build our sovereign capabilities.
I mean, you almost answered my next question, which was specific to sectors, right? Like AI coming in and drones, and some of these industries have very regulatory sort of nuances that you need to focus on. So you already answered that.
I will though touch on AI a bit to say
Yes.
that there is a lot of misconception about India being slow on the uptake on AI, right? Because everybody's like, okay, where is your LLM? Where is your foundation model? The US has got ChatGPT and China has DeepSeek. So, where is our LLM? And I think, we've been talking a lot to policymakers, Shreya, and the government is taking a very deliberate, frugal and open-minded approach to AI. And they're like, you know what? If Google wants to come and invest in India, if Anthropic wants to come, if OpenAI wants to come, that's absolutely fine. We're going to welcome them and let the technology come in, while we're very aware that we need to build our sovereign capabilities. So they're amping up the compute, they're amping up the infrastructure, but they're not going to go crazy spending hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, true.
So the government's like, you know what, let's pause. Let's see what's going on in AI, because this seems, from one day people saying it's a hype cycle and a bubble on AI, to another day people saying this is the most transformative thing you've seen. So the government's taking a thoughtful, frugal and deliberate approach to AI.
Which I think is necessary, especially in the landscape that we're in, like you said. And speaking of regulation in India, our Indian regulatory environment, how does that compare with global innovation hubs, and where do we really need to catch up?
So, like I said, there are pockets where India is way ahead. I think some of our regulators are the smartest around the world. When you go to platforms like the World Economic Forum in Davos and you hear Indian policymakers, Indian regulators, they're so clued in, they know what's going on, and they have a pulse. Secondly, they're more conservative. And while it may seem like short-term pain, but in the long term that works, because if you look at the RBI or SEBI, they will not allow crypto in India. They might ban gaming in India, but you know what? They're okay not being seen so front and ahead on certain innovation sectors which also come with risks and harm. So the government's very, very seized on our regulators of first protecting citizens and then being innovation first. Sometimes they get called out for it, but we think that in the long term, for a country that's in a developing phase like India, that is the right approach. But on many other things like deep tech, as I said, where China is miles ahead, or on other fronts, there is a lot of catch up to be done.
Yeah. Which brings me to policy reform. And if you had like a wish list or a recommended one policy change that would meaningfully accelerate the startup environment in the way that it is now, what would that be?
So I think one thing we hear a lot from our founders and from startups is around ESOP taxation.
Right.
So, with so many startups now, listing, as well as ESOPs being a great way to retain and compensate employees, we think that the current taxation structure is not suited well to employees because, it's complicated and I won't go into it, but basically there is taxation to be met with, like there is taxation even before realization.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a pain point, and that's something we're pushing the government very hard to relook at, because we think that with new age companies and with startups becoming job creators and employers, this will be a trend that will catch up, and we want more wealth generation. We want ESOPs to become more lucrative as a compensation option.
Absolutely. I think that brings me to a vision that you have. If you were to look ahead at the next decade, and it's an exciting decade ahead of us, it's complex, but it's exciting. What gives you the most confidence about our future, and what should founders brace for in the landscape of policy?
Well, Shreya, I think there's never been a more exciting time to build and never been a more exciting time to be in India. I mean, India's soft power, India's hard power, India's is the flavor of the season. Look at it globally. I mean, we have the India AI Summit coming up in February, the AI Impact Summit, which Prime Minister Modi is leading. And I cannot tell you the excitement. There isn't an AI founder globally who's not going to be in India.
True.
And the excitement already. I mean, while the world is saying that the AI energy and action and buzz is in the valley, and you know what, there's nothing here, go to the valley if you want to build. But the adoption is here. The deployment of AI is here. The market is here.
And so, the back end is here. The backbone is here.
The GCCs are coming up here. The global capability centers are coming up here. So India clearly is impossible to ignore right now in the global economic landscape. And that's why it's a great time to be here, because there's geopolitical uncertainty everywhere else in the world. Growth rates aren't exciting. Indian markets are doing so well. I mean, just look at the data we have around the Indian stock markets. I mean, the kind of listings we've seen this year. So India clearly is looking in a good spot right now, and the next decade will be exciting, and we're very excited to play a big role because the $4 trillion have already happened. India is now a $4 trillion economy. We're now thinking of the next $4 trillion, and we think the new age economy will play a big role. So instead of dynastic businesses, generational family businesses, you now have someone sitting in this room tomorrow, 7 years from now, 10 years from now, could be ringing the bell and listing their company, because those are real examples that have happened.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the energy we're excited about.
Which is so phenomenal. And I just have to say, we spoke last evening, we spoke today. Yesterday, we looked at you, the leader. Today, we look at you, the founder, the entrepreneur. If you had to leave any entrepreneurs in the room, any aspiring entrepreneurs, I'm hoping we see some hands. Yes. If you were to tell them the one thing that they should think of, dream of, to live that entrepreneur dream, what would that be from your journey?
Moonshot thinking. I mean, nothing gets done if you don't think moonshot. So it's very important to think big. When we started out last year, I said we'll set ourselves an audacious goal. We want to be 50 members in a short span. We're now at 60. But I said, everything has to be big and bold. So when we were going to the US and taking a delegation, I reached out to NASDAQ and said, we're getting a delegation of founders, but we want to be on the NASDAQ tower. And you know what? Just the fact that we thought about it, we pushed hard. We had the Startup Policy Forum logo on the NASDAQ tower in 10 months of inception. So, we felt very proud we could make it happen, and that was a goosebump moment because we said this is India's power. The fact that a tech exchange like NASDAQ is welcoming Indian founders, and we had our logo up there. That moment of seeing that logo come up on the NASDAQ tower was a moment which felt very empowering. So I would just say you have to think big and bold. You have to have moonshot thinking. And something that I think Kritika said yesterday, that done is better than perfect. Ideas are great, but execution is where it all matters.
Absolutely. By the way, we, Anita B, although it looks like this, are a completely bootstrapped startup. We have 10 people, plus me on the team. And I know exactly what you mean. If your big, hairy, audacious goal is taking 10 people in a year of a geopolitical landscape that gave us the frugality of this, and then to envision and put this together and have 6,000 people walk through those doors is something that is,
Amazing. A round of applause.
No, I'm just saying that is what you can do.
Correct.
If you set your eye on the ball. With that, let's open up for a question. We have 3 more minutes, and I want the audience to interact with Shweta because, those of you who walked in a little late missed the beginning, but all sessions are going to go up. So everything's going to be available. There are people watching virtually as well.
Super.
So everything will be online, and some of these sessions are those, bookmark sessions. So make sure to spread the word and get people to watch it as well.
Hi, I'm Salome. I'm a founder of a robotics and manufacturing startup. In your talk, Shweta, you skewed more towards AI. I would love to know if you have any special inputs regarding policies within the space of smart manufacturing, robotics, or climate tech startups.
Excellent. I'm glad to see founders in the room, and for robotics, please reach out to us. As I said, we have kicked off an initiative called 100 Desi Deep Techs. And the 100 Desi Deep Techs is our mission to identify top 100 deep tech companies out of India. And these aren't necessarily companies that have scaled or have achieved a certain target of revenue, but they're more companies where founders are excited about playing a role in shaping policy, so that we can take your actionable inputs and send them to the government, and we want real on-ground inputs. And how we're building this out, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but how we're building this out is that we would want you to send our inputs, and then we will select the cohort of 100. We have a very strong deep tech advisory board with top investors, founders, and policymakers that will select the final 100. We've done a number of what we call deep tech Baatcheet editions across the country. So we're very in advanced stages of closing out this cohort, so you should write to us. But to quickly answer your question, there's a lot of thinking in the government right now on things like procurement. If you want deep tech to really succeed, then the government has to be a buyer. And is the government willing to be a buyer? What are the modalities? How do we ensure that that there are no barriers like net worth and other issues that come in when the government has to play the role of a buyer? Secondly, around certification, we hear from a lot of deep tech startups like you that global certifications, and the fact that there is we need to create a way in which global certifications are acceptable, or there is some sort of interoperability between global and local certifications. The third, around testing infrastructure, we're trying to see if there can be shared testing infrastructure for deep tech companies that the government will build out, which will enable startups like yours. So a lot of work going on in deep tech policy. Would love to talk to you.
I also want to propose the inclusion of certain startups who would allow for a more coherent climate change policy and adaptation, specifically because I work in the water sector, and we are finding that there's a lot of localized impacts of poor water quality on allied industries like aquaculture, as well as B2B sector. So I'll be happy to send across at least my proposal.
Please do. The best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive. If you can DM me on LinkedIn, I will respond to you.
I will surely do that. Thank you so much.
Just one last question because we're up on time.
resonated that, if you're building, I mean, this is the best time to build in India today, phenomenal policies. Since you have this forum and you have ears of the government, just a feedback, they have this phenomenal thing, GEM, right, which is the procurement thing. Amazing network, amazing sort of, way for startups to get in there. At a policy level, it's excellent. But at an execution level, it is very frustrating. And we have been trying for 1 year. We have closed the biggest corporates. We just can't get a foothold in GEM.
Please write to me,
Yeah.
Gem Overhaul, and
Yeah.
it's something we're working on.
Yeah.
We totally agree with you. It is a pain point, and
Yeah.
we heard from several startups. It is on the government's radar, but do write to me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And just as yesterday, another fantastic conversation today. Thank you so much, Shweta.
Thank you, Shreya. Always a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing this community together. A big round of applause for Shreya, because
I
I,
mean-
think,
We are, because all of you are. I mean, I could sit here, the two of us could have this conversation anywhere in the world, but having you here in your presence is what makes this all of the magic that it is. So thank you.
No, and community is very important.
Yeah.
So it's great that you all are part of this community, because as a community builder myself, ecosystem builder, I always want to support, because I know how hard it is. You do not know the effort at the back end to bring this room together. So it's great that you all are showing up, because only at scale can we make change happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Kajal, back to you.
Thank you. Oh my God, what a firebrand. Shweta Rajpal Kohli and Shreya Krishnan. To make change at grassroots level and to talk about it here, I think just makes all the difference. Thank you both of you for such a wonderful conversation. Shweta, we do have a memento and I'm going to ask Shreya to please hand it over.